Hey everyone, this is Julia with Chaptermint, and today I am here with Jesse Muehlbauer, and he has written this fabulous book that I've just finished reading, Artificial Conspiracy, and he is here to explain or talk to us about his passion for literary fiction, which I am really glad you're here because I did not grow up with any kind of literary background. I wasn't one of those kids, and I guess I'm curious if you were, that grew, like, how old were you when you knew you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, great question. I was very young. I wrote my first short story at probably the age of 7. And they were, sort of rip-offs from different things I'd read and seen there as I was developing my writing skill. But very young. I was a child prodigy.
Nice, right. And see, I wasn't that kid. I didn't decide that I wanted to read or write a book until a couple of years ago. So I know nothing. And so as a person that knows nothing, tell me about literary fiction. What is it? What makes it different than genre fiction?
It's a great question. So first of all, literary fiction, when we use this term, we're not saying literary fiction is better than. Literary fiction is different. It's its own thing. And literary fiction primarily can be defined as both it's timely and timeless. So literary fiction addresses the human condition right here and now, but speaks to universal themes as well. So themes about fear of death, the afterlife, the economy of a struggling nation, things that will be applicable now and in the future. So, and I made some notes here, so if you see me reference them, that's what I'm doing here. I swear I'm not bored talking to you. I wanted to address the kind of not only the differences when a writer is trying to attempt literary fiction, but I'm hoping as well that readers, when they go to attempt to read a more literary book, will find some more enjoyment in knowing what to look for and sort of how to process it. An easy example that I like to give is, it's not necessarily a short story, but it's a short novel. It's called The Moon is Down by John Steinbeck. Came out in 1942. And this story is great. And it's a great example of literary fiction because it addresses something that was very hot topic at the time in 1942, but it does it in a universal way. So it's about a small village that gets overrun by this very ruthless military sort of faction that takes over the town. And the book addresses the consequences of both the conquered and the conquerors. Now, it's clearly written to reflect Nazi Germany and what was going on at the time in World War II. But the conquerors are never mentioned. They're never defined necessarily. It's just an authoritarian military force that comes in, takes over this small town, and it shows the relationship between the two and how it deteriorates. And I think it's so well written because clearly it was applicable to the people in the 1940s, and they knew what Steinbeck was trying to say. But if you read it today, it could be applicable to any authoritarian regime anywhere with a military arm, and unfortunately, anytime in the future, probably. So literary fiction has that, wow, this is really powerful now, but it has that staying power well into the future because it addresses a universal theme. So that was the first example I wanted to give.
I love that. And so does literary fiction have a tendency not to go as much into pop culture references and clothing, timing, things like that? Does it keep it pretty open?
That is a really astute observation, and that is correct. Pop culture references are rare in literary fiction because what it's trying to do is paint a picture of what life is like now for the people who are on the page, but also what would be applicable in the future, or even what was applicable in the past. Pop culture references is something I tried to avoid in my 2 novels, All the Moonlight on Earth and The Artificial Conspiracy. And the reason I did so was for those reasons, but also, have you ever been reading a literary book or one that's attempting a literary style, and you come across a reference like the Housewives of Beverly Hills or whatever that show is? I came across that once. It's a real disrupt in where you're supposed to be as a reader.
Right. It kind of pulls you out of the story.
That's exactly right. It pulls you out of the story, and so I tried to avoid any references like that in both of my books. Now, there are some things that I did include, and literary writers actually have a wide amount of colors that they can paint with. I don't want to make it seem like it's restricting. You just have to think of it in sort of a different mode than a pop thriller, fiction novel that you're writing that's meant for this time and this time only. Mm-hmm. So some of the components that make up literary fiction are motifs. And I stole this definition from online, so it's not my original. Motif is essentially a recurring element, like a phrase, an idea, an image, and it's there as a sort of a guidepost for the reader to carry their way through the story. An example from a film before I get into fiction, because it's probably one most of us have seen, Citizen Kane, Rosebud. Rosebud, whatever it is, this guy's trying to figure out what is Rosebud, and it's a recurring statement throughout the movie, and it gets the necessity of finding out who or what was Rosebud intensifies the closer you get to the end of the story. And so that's a really great example of a motif. It's this thing that is thread throughout the story. Who is John Galt? An example from the novel Atlas Shrugged, right? Who is John Galt?
Oh my gosh, that one in the Fountainhead. I hate saying it out loud because so many people do not like Ayn Rand, but
yes,
this changed my life when I was in high school.
Agreed. She's one of my favorite writers. Atlas Shrugged is one of my favorite novels. Mm-hmm. And Who is John Galt not only starts off the novel, it's literally the first sentence, but it's the question that the protagonist has to answer in order to fulfill the promise of the story, right? And rescue what's going on in as the world is crumbling. So that's another example of a motif. It has to be a recurring theme, but it should also be tied to the motivation of the protagonist. Mm-hmm. In my novel, since you brought it up,
yes,
The Artificial Conspiracy, Is This the End of the World? Is a recurring motif. It's seen on billboards everywhere around the world, and people are wondering who put these billboards up, what does it mean? The protagonist eventually starts to suspect the meaning is less important than who's posting it, right? Mm-hmm. So that's an example of a motif. In the first book, All the Moonlight on Earth, the motif is connected to a question that is personally bothering the protagonist. And it's a statement of "Kate jumped, you fool." It's this memory that he has. And it's a it's this vindictive statement that he says to himself, "Kate jumped, you fool." And it's essentially saying, you're not examining what happened properly. You're ignoring what you know to be true. Mm-hmm. And that was the thing that Dostoevsky liked to do in his books as well. This calling that you're supposed to fulfill, and that you're doing exactly the opposite, right? So these are motifs, and they're very common in literary fiction, and they're very powerful as literary tools because they grab the interest of the reader and they keep them motivated to find out who, what, why is this important, and how is it resolved. So before I move on, did you have any questions on that?
Well, I have two questions. None of them are specifically about that, but do you only read literary fiction, or do you ever pick up a comedy or a book that's not like this?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Both in fiction, of course, and in memoir and things like that are they're more lighthearted. You need that for sure. One of the things that this is actually an interesting counterexample. I'm a big fan of Michael Crichton's work. He's the father of the techno thriller, right? He wrote Sphere and Jurassic Park and Timeline and all these great stories. Mm-hmm. His books are generally not considered literary fiction because they're very set in the time and period in which they were placed, both the heavy technology lingo as well as some of the events of the time. Now, he's a phenomenal storyteller, and his books have real storytelling power. They're still applicable today, especially the themes of man and technology failing to interact. That's a huge thing that he does. But if you reread them today, they do seem quite dated because of how heavily technical they are. And the technology is, and we're not even We're less than 20 years since the author died.
Right.
So again, that's not to say it's good or bad. It's just he was writing for a specific purpose. It served that purpose. They're still very readable and enjoyable today, but the literary holding power of the message gets muddied down by how technical the books are.
What about Jane Austen?
So, yeah, Jane Austen is widely loved. I would consider her literary in the fact that she addresses those universal themes, both in the romance and the drama of what she describes within her stories and with her characters. Sure, there's dated references, but the theme connected with the goal of the protagonist is there. It's intact. It remains. So I would say that definitely it's literary.
Okay, good. Because I love Jane Austen.
Oh yeah,
Right.
yes, a virtuoso for sure.
Right.
Let me address another common component, and it's connected to motifs. It's called a leitmotif. And leitmotifs are a recurring theme, but it's a musical recurring theme. Now, this is more often seen in films or something you can hear, musical, like classical musical notes. But in All the Moonlight on Earth, I had a leitmotif throughout the book, which was these 9 notes that the protagonist vaguely remembered, but couldn't quite piece together where she heard it or why it was coming to mind. And I mentioned it enough that the reader suspected this is probably important, but we don't know why yet. And then it's revealed at the end why it was important. So leitmotifs are nice if you're someone who enjoys music and you want to tie the emotional kind of touchstone that music offers us and put it in a page in a written form. Leitmotifs are very powerful. And I also did that a little bit in Artificial Conspiracy with the Fiery Angel concept. The Fiery Angel is a opera written by Prokofiev. I'm a big fan of the music from that. It's very intense, but I put little pieces of it here and there throughout the book because it relates to the story, right? It's about trying to find this, trying to define this thing and this evil presence, trying to bring down this romantic relationship that's just starting to blossom. So you can do that as a writer. You can take something that someone might know and stretch it out a bit in your story. And if you do it with something that's like classical music, something that's going to be remembered, that's going to be respected 100 years from now, that has the staying power rather than whatever the most popular pop hit of the day is at the moment.
So Dua Lipa probably wouldn't work.
And I love Dua Lipa, big fan of Dua. But no, I probably wouldn't reference Dua Lipa. I wouldn't reference Levitating in my novel if I wanted it to be literary fiction. If that's not my goal, go for it. Another thing, and this is so, you brought up Ayn Rand earlier. She did this brilliantly in both of her novels, landmarks. Landmarks are very powerful tools for literary fiction because most of them have staying power. Most of them represent a feeling or an awe. The Empire State Building, right? The Empire State Building is something that's been around 100 years or more, and it's not going anywhere. And it's one of those, it's the symbol of New York City, more than the Empire State Building, more than anything else you can imagine. More than the Statue of Liberty. Right. The Empire State Building is there, and it holds a lot of symbolic power for prestige, for kind of that old school noir kind of feel to maybe old time New York. There's all sorts of things you can attach to it. In All the Moonlight on Earth, I used the Golden Gate Bridge and the Bay Bridge because it's set in San Francisco. So whenever the protagonist, Gillen, and I was very consistent and intentional with this, every time he looks at the Golden Gate Bridge, it's spoken in a positive statement, a positive mindset. Every time he is looking at or someone references the Bay Bridge, there's a negative connotation to it. And that's because something negative happened on the Bay Bridge, and he has positive memories of the Golden Gate. So use those to your advantage as a writer and keep it consistent. That's another very common thing that's done in literary fiction.
So you're writing you're writing a book and you have all these layers. How many of the layers do you think an actual reader can absorb or pick out or find? It's like an onion.
The point is not always for them to pick up on everything. Now, some readers will, the most astute will, and I'll be the first to admit, sometimes I miss things. I'll read about books I've read and be like, well, I missed that. That was over my head. But that's okay, because the writer's job is not necessarily for the reader to pick up every bit of symbolism that's there. But, Hemingway was big on the pyramid, or not the pyramid, the iceberg theory, which is that a lot of the subtext should be under the surface. Now, you can take that too far, and I don't necessarily write with that philosophy in mind, but subtext is important, and symbolism is important in literary fiction. And the readers, if they don't understand it explicitly, they will feel it implicitly, that something is important, that something is important to the protagonist, that something gives a setting or a scene gravity in that moment, even if they can't completely explain why. I'm all for that. And maybe on a second read, the reader picks up a little more, right? But it's all about their experience by the end, even if they didn't pick up explicitly all of the symbolism.
And so I consider your book very suspenseful also. So literary fiction can have subgenres.
Yes, correct.
I mean, I would consider Jane Austen's books romance books, right? They always end with a happily ever after.
Correct.
But they're also literary fiction.
You and I have spoken about this before. I think romance and suspense are two sides of the same coin, because it takes tremendous courage to enter a relationship. And so the suspenseful element, will they get together? Will they not? Will they stay together? Will they not? Very suspenseful. So I think that they dovetail beautifully together. And literary fiction, by the rules of fiction, has to have other subgenres connected to it. It's a drama, or it's a mystery, or it's a thriller, or it's a science fiction set 200 years in the future, or it's a historical novel set 200 years in the past. Whatever it is, what you are doing as a writer is saying, okay, the story is going to be, like with mine, historical sci-fi. Right. That's the story. But I'm going to write it. I'm intentionally writing it in a literary way, because that's the way I want my reader to experience it. And so by that account, I'm going to follow certain rules and apply certain things, like we've discussed, to make it literary, even though the subgenre is historical fiction, sci-fi, whatever. And you can do that. And the more you practice it, not only the better you'll get at it, but you'll start to recognize those in other books that you like reading.
Interesting. I mean, this to me is so fascinating, because like I said, I didn't learn this in high school. I was doing other things in high school. I don't know what I was doing, but so
I'm going to say one thing about high school. Just throw this out there. I'm a big believer in getting high schoolers to read classic works, literary fiction. However, I do think that we could be more judicious in the titles we select, because there's certain books that are difficult to just jump into unless you have some building blocks to understand. A great example is of a literary fiction work that's very readable and easy to go through, Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind is immensely readable. Very few people have difficulty picking up on the message, the themes, the patterns in it. The writing, while very beautiful, flows very well. It's very easy to read. Dostoevsky, different story, right? Crime and Punishment. Crime and Punishment, phenomenal story. I would not give it to a freshman without them understanding how to read and understand literary fiction.
Right.
And I just fear that we might turn students off from trying other books if we hit them right out of the gate with something as difficult prose as, say, like Nathaniel Hawthorne's the Scarlet Letter, right? Great story.
But we all read that in high school.
All read that in high school. Maybe I would start with something else and help them build to that, right? Maybe start them off with Fahrenheit 451. Great literary novel, easy to read. things like that. So I just, if anyone's listening who has that sort of influence, think about in what order should we give literary fiction, and open up this concept gradually so that they can grow an appreciation for the great literary works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because a lot of them, for me, are a little too traumatic. They're a little too guy-centric.
Yes, many of them.
You know, they're just like Grapes of Wrath, anything by Steinbeck. I'm like, oh God, no, I don't. Well, it's too intense. It's not going to foster my creativity. It more puts me like in a state of depression and sadness, you know, which I know that's what,
and you'll find the writer that does
like,
it for you.
Right. They're supposed to get you to feel something.
Yeah.
I really like books and movies to make me not feel what I'm feeling. Right. And so maybe I'm a secret Steinbeck, like inside my internal brain is a Steinbeck. And so when I read his stuff, it triggers me too much.
And that's entirely possible. There are great writers, well-respected writers that I have difficulty either getting into because I don't follow the writing style. I'm having difficulty with feeling what they're trying to, convey on the page. Perfectly fine. It's might not be your book, or might not be your style, might not be your writer. That happens.
Right. Absolutely.
But don't write off all of, the great works. Speaking to you directly, but whoever, don't write them off just because one was not your cup of tea.
Right. I loved Catcher in the Rye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that book because all the swear words, and because it was so defiant, and it was like, I'm reading an adult book.
Yeah.
That was the first book I read that I was like, ooh, my parents knew what this was about, which of course they did, but I felt like I was getting away with something.
Well, and it's written in the more colloquial language that people, not only at the time, but even today, in its own way, can sort of relate to. It's sort of I would call it a populist literary work. And there are lots of examples of that. I think A Tree Grows in Brooklyn is another great example of a very writing that's beautiful and excellent, but easy to get through. Betty Smith is a great writer. So, keep trying different works. Not everyone likes Fitzgerald, Fitzgerald is not everyone's cup of tea, but his stories are memorable. And the poor guy died thinking he was a failure, and his, at least a couple of his novels are considered the great American work. So don't give up.
Don't give up. Let's switch just a little bit to more of the craft of writing. And so when you start a new project, what tends to come first for you? The characters, the theme, the motif, questions that you want to explore?
You will get very good advice from prolific writers, people who write a lot of different books and write them quickly. I write literary fiction and I write it slowly. So only take my advice if that's what you're aiming to write, okay? My goal when I'm putting pen to paper is usually to address something that bothers me. That's my motivation. I'm sitting with a problem, a story problem, something in society, something personally, something emotionally, spiritually, whatever, that bothers me. And it bothers me relentlessly. And I'm like, I should probably write about this. That's the first step for me. Then I think, well, okay, we got to narrow it down. Like, for instance, a huge theme in The Artificial Conspiracy is the suffering of humanity, right? The sort of unrelenting suffering. Well, that bothers me, but that's a huge scope, and you got to narrow it down if your book's not going to be 1,500 pages. So the next step is to narrow it down. And what I found that helps is thinking about, how do I take this abstract concept and turn it into a concrete? And the way that I do that is to create the character then. Who is the protagonist? Who is going to experience the problem that I'm feeling? The same thing that bothers me is going to bother them. Who is that? So then I start working on the protagonist. And I have found that protagonists come to me very easily, but that is because I'm a very curious person when it comes to people. I talk to people a lot. I interview a lot of people. And I find them very interesting. And my subconscious kind of churns that into this composite character of people that I've met and people I've read about. And that's something that I'm just throwing this out there. Professional critics have usually, even if they haven't liked certain elements of my book, have always been very complimentary of my characters. And that's something that writers should really focus on, is crafting characters that are compelling and that are flawed and are very human, but in a heroic way. And I really like that. I don't write characters who are everyday people. I write about people who have a unique ability somewhere or a driven mindset towards some goal. And I feel that when I read my own work and when other people have read about my characters, they feel motivated, encouraged. They feel like they've read about someone that they could relate to and maybe grasp onto. I like those types of protagonists and heroes. So that's the next step for me. And then I would say the step after that is crystallizing your plot, because the plot is the carriage. It's the vehicle to carry your story. And the plot and your theme have to work together to complement the protagonist and their journey. And a lot of writers who struggle with this, they say, kill your darlings. You've got to trim that plot down to only what is applicable to move your protagonist forward. The plot, and I'm a big believer in this, and not all writers agree with me on this, the plot is there to serve the character, not the other way around. So if your character if you have it reversed, the character is going to start doing weird things to serve the plot because you want it to go here.
Right.
And readers pick up on that, and they're like, that doesn't make sense. Why would this character do that? Why would they say that?
Readers call bullshit well, way better than we do, I think, especially in a first draft.
Yeah,
right?
Correct. Oh yeah, we're in love with our work. This is the best thing that anyone's ever written. And then, reality sets in a little later.
Right.
So if you start with those three things in that order, I have found for my writing it to be very helpful. If you do them in a different order, that's fine. But literary fiction is very character driven and is entirely dependent on a symbiotic relationship between the plot and the protagonist. And if you get that right, everything else, the themes, the motifs, the symbolism, everything else will fall into place.
I think that you said something that I wake up every day and hope never happens to me, is to have a critic read my book. Never, ever. No, no. To know that they're going to read it and then tell people what they think about it in writing. I mean, like on paper or in a review. No, I have zero. I don't have enough confidence in my writing for that. Wives and friends and family, sure.
Yeah.
But not a real person.
But then the very fact that you wrote it, see, writing is one thing, publishing is another. You wrote a book and you decided to put it out there for public consumption. And at some point, someone's going to read your book and they're not going to like it.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
And then you know that. And that's the nature of writing. The way that writers handle that pushback is up to us, because the person pushing back may have been trying to offer a real critique of a place that, feedback to improve, or they may have just been having a bad day and you were the brunt of it. And they're like, you know what? Your book sucks. So as someone who's experienced all types of feedback, I can say, remember, as a writer, you write for yourself first. That's what I do. I write for my own enjoyment and for an audience of one. The fact that other people enjoy my work is always a shock to me.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I don't mind if it's somebody, and I have gotten some great critiques on my book, but they were not professional critics. Those people terrify me. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to you, because my trauma is not important in this interview. So a great question that I saw is like, how do you develop characters when so much of the story happens internally?
How do I develop characters when so much of the story happens internally? Well, when I'm crafting a character, it's going to be a composite of my psychological state, my emotions, my history, even if I have no relation, for instance, of being a young female Asian immigrant artist who has MS, right? Like,
Yeah.
but the fact that I've taken things that I know, people I've interviewed, my own thought process of what it would be like to step into those shoes, that's how you start to chip away at this piece, at this sculpture, and then you start to realize who this character actually is. And it will surprise you at some point. I think we talked about this last time we had a chat, but when I was writing, well, I'll give a different example because I gave this last time for Mirai. When I was writing Gillen, my protagonist in All the Moonlight on Earth, I thought I had him down pat. I mean, it was very biographical and certain things that had happened to me, but there was his sort of pacifistic nature was surprising to me. I didn't set out to write it that way. And yet it appeared on the page in the very first chapter. And I was like, oh, okay. And that's when you realize as the writer, your subconscious knows something that you're only starting to understand now. And it turned out to be vital for the book at the climax of the story. And so that was something I did not know about the character when I set out to write him. But it interfaced beautifully with the rest of the story and the characters. And as a writer, don't be afraid to embrace that, so long as it doesn't violate the theme of your plot.
That is good advice. I mean, and it makes sense, but it's something that there's so many things that make sense, but when you're writing and you're caught up in the story and you're moving through, especially that first draft, I mean, you can get pulled and pushed and
exactly. And that's why, the drafts exist. And that's why some writers need this feedback early on. And I respect them for that. You do what works for you. I do not let anyone read my outline, early drafts. My wife doesn't even get to read it until much later on in the process, because I need the freedom to fail. I need the freedom to write crap on the page and be like, oh, this is wrong. This is way the frick wrong, and just get rid of it. There are characters I've eliminated who I liked, who readers may have adored and be like, no, you can't take this character away. But I know as the writer, this does not serve the plot and is not going to help me at the end. So they need to go. So I would say a piece of advice, I view writing very much like an Instapot. You put everything in the Instapot, you lock it, you got to let everything in there simmer. And the more you reveal about your book early on, the more of the steam gets let out. And you don't want that to happen.
I'm curious this is slightly off topic, but not completely. While you're writing a book and you're kind of immersed in it, do you get I get these, I call them water drops. Like they're just these huge droplets of ideas that I'll just be minding my own business, driving or whatever. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wow. And if I don't write that idea down, if I don't find a way to capture it, it will be gone forever. I mean, and even if it's a mind-blowing, this is going to make the book idea, if I do not capture it, I will never in a million years remember it. Do you get these ideas when you're writing, when it starts really flowing?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the elements of surprise is that's so enjoyable with writing is these ideas that pop in your head while you're writing it. As good of an outline as you can possibly write, there's still going to be something that connects dots that you weren't anticipating. And again, I cannot stress this enough. The more you read good books, the more you watch fantastic film, the more you listen to powerful music, it feeds your subconscious. And your subconscious is what feeds your consciousness with these ideas that come out of nowhere,
right?
But actually were there simmering for a long time. And it makes it so much easier. It does so much of the heavy lifting for you. Yes, I have come up with ideas in the shower or driving, and I think, wow, I got to write that down. I'm pulling up. I won't say her name or it'll activate her, but you know who I'm talking about on the phone. Be like, hey, Set a reminder to look this up when I get home.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you absolutely have to do that. Write those ideas down as fast as you can, because then they float in the air and they go away and they go on to the next person.
Never happened. Yes,
Yep.
yes,
Mhm.
yes. I do
Yeah.
believe, I think that's true. I think they go on to the next person. Not to keep going to, I don't want to put everybody, let's like, okay, so if somebody is inspired right now about what we've talked about, which I'd be hard pressed to think anybody wouldn't be, what would you suggest their next step be?
If they're a writer,
Mm-hmm.
if you're a writer and you have not written before, maybe sat down to actually get something done. You've written here and there, but you're like, this is going to be my first book. This is a novel. This is a short story, whatever. Don't be afraid of it. I know a lot of writers who sit down and are terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And they're terrified because they're thinking about their book sitting on a bookshelf at Barnes and Noble. That is the farthest thing from your mind. You need to be thinking about, what story would I enjoy reading when I'm done with this first writing process, with this draft?
Mm-hmm.
And if you've gotten to the end of your draft and you're like, I do not enjoy this story, then something's wrong. Or if you get to the end of your draft and you love it, you're like, this is such an enjoyable story. I really think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
No one else is going to believe in your work until you do. That is the absolute truth.
Yeah.
So the more you love it, the more you're going to sell it, meaning sell it, the idea, to people. You're going to promote it. You're going to be proud of it. And you're going to turn heads and make people want to pick it up off the shelf and be like, oh, what's this about? So believe in your work. Excellent things deserve to exist, and put it out there. And that's the first step that you need to think about, is the fact that you need to love it.
Yes, that is great advice. And I'm going to hold your book up one more time. This book is great. I just finished it. I think everybody should read it. And I think that in it will demonstrate all the things that he has talked about, classically. It's right here. And then you can kind of go back and forth. And it's like the education which he has given us is in between the pages. And I think it's so great. I think that's why all the things that you talk about, or that we've talked about today, are the very reasons I really enjoyed the book.
I appreciate that. I'm thrilled you enjoyed it, and it's very exciting to meet another writer who's motivated like you are to share this and disseminate this information with other writers and readers. So, yeah, this has been great fun. I'll come back to Chaptermint anytime.
Nice, excellent. Thank you, sir. Absolutely. Have a fabulous day, and we look forward to talking to you again.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.